Today I'm going to do a video follow-up on how to detox yourself from a spike protein. I did a video on this within last 2 years, and it's actually one of you on YouTube asked me if I could do a follow-up. I looked up the same authors, and indeed they did their own follow-up. They published a paper in the latter half of 2024. And I wanted to present this paper to you because it's super interesting. Why? Because they focused on autophagy, and I'll explain what that is, and especially its role in protecting against spike protein-induced damage of mitochondria. The reason why this is of interest to me, because lately we've been talking a lot about mitochondria. We've been talking about mitochondria, how the mitochondria is important in order to it works like a processor, mini processors in our body, and basically how that is important to our health. And we're now also exploring the concept that basically cancer could be a metabolic disease as opposed to genetic based disease. And that has to do with basically due to destruction of proper function of mitochondria. Okay, so that clearly this is tied into it. So this is obviously of some interest in case spike protein is also damaging mitochondria, and how do we protect ourselves from this type of damage, okay? So basically, the authors wanted to focus on what they refer to as spike-associated pathology, and there's two of these. One of them is long COVID, so that's when you have virus infection and the spike protein from the virus infection is causing long COVID. And the other one is what they refer to as post-vaccination syndrome. I really like this term. This is now, I can tell you that this term is now being captured in science as a new keyword to describe basically the potential problems or disease associated post-vaccination. So this is a completely new concept that is now finally being openly discussed in science. Before it was still a taboo to even bring up that kind of concept. Anyway, so this is what they wanted to focus. So the very first part of this paper talks about how the spike protein causes damage. It's really, really fascinating, but I don't think I will cover that in this video. I think it deserves to be a completely separate video of its own, so stay tuned for that. Instead, we're going to talk about basically how to protect yourself from the spike protein damage in relation to especially protecting mitochondria. So we're gonna go to their figure where they show all of this. This is all summarized in like one figure in terms of how the spike protein causes the damage, number one, and number two, how to protect yourself. So let's go over that figure really quick. So the first thing I want you to focus in that figure is this red blob, not a scientific term, red blob, which is basically a spike protein. So this is where you see that's individual spike protein, okay? Right above that red blob, you see multicolored blob. So there's red, green, and yellow. Basically, that symbolizes that multiple spike proteins can coalesce together and basically cause aggregates. So keep that in mind, okay? Now, after that, we're going to focus on how the spike protein causes damage with relation to mitochondria. So first of all, it can cause damage directly to the function of mitochondria. So you can see an arrow down below the red blob, the spike protein, and you can see damaged mitochondria. The second one is that spike protein can also inhibit mitophagy. So what is mitophagy? Mitophagy is a specific form of autophagy, and I'll talk about that in a second, which is basically marking damaged mitochondria for destruction. So that if the mitochondria is damaged, it can be removed and therefore replaced with the new ones. But that's another problem that spike protein causes. Apparently, it prevents the generation of new healthy mitochondria as well. Okay, so that's problem number three. And the last problem is that, you know, as I mentioned, those spike protein aggregates I was just talking about a second ago, well, those aggregates can cause microclots. This is one of the first things I investigated when it comes to spike protein damage. I did a very big series on how the spike protein could be causing microclots, so check that out. And if you have microclots floating in the blood, it can reduce oxygen flow in the blood, and therefore this can lead to a condition called hypoxia, not enough oxygen being delivered to tissues. And this was also a very common problem seen with some of the severe cases of COVID-19. All right, so these are the problems. Now, they also list all of the potential solutions on that graph, and we're going to go over these now one by one, okay? So number one, we're going to talk about, there's 4 ways of how the authors talk about potentially solving this. Number one is direct degradation of the spike protein itself, okay? And the other 3 is how to counteract the damaging effects of the spike protein. And this is, number 1 was to induce the mitophagy, or induce the programmed way of removing damaged mitochondria. Number 2 was to induce mitogenesis, or basically genesis or production of new healthy mitochondria. Number 3 was how to induce, so that was number 3. And number 4, so we want to induce mitophagy, want to induce mitogenesis, and the last one is how to support proper function of mitochondria so that they thrive and they work the best they can. And we're going to go over all of these one by one. So first, let's start with how to directly remove the spike protein. And here they focus on 2 things. Number 1 was nattokinase. Nattokinase comes from Japanese food natto. Nattokinase itself is a protein-specific enzyme. Enzyme means it does something, so it basically either it breaks down something or creates something. That's what enzyme means as a protein. So it has a specific machinery. Nattokinase, we did a video on this, so check that out. It can directly, supposedly, destroy spike protein, right? Why do I mention the food natto? It's because we will come back to it. It has another benefit we'll mention later on in the video if I don't forget. So that's nattokinase. But nattokinase, not only can it degrade the spike protein itself, it's been shown in, say, laboratory experiments, but it is also thrombolytic or fibrinolytic, meaning it can destroy clots, okay? And therefore, it is assumed that it would be great to remove those spike protein aggregates. Another one that I mentioned for removing the spike protein aggregates is potentially aspirin, all right? So that's one way of directly degrading spike protein. The second one is autophagy. All right, so now we get to mention what is autophagy. So, and I am coming to an end before I have to climb again. And basically, autophagy is this process that allows to remove anything inside your cell that is either a waste or is no longer working properly. So it's a programmed way of removing debris or issues from the cell. So what happens is the contents are marked for degradations. It's surrounded by this bubble called autophagosome. This bubble then fuses with what is called lysosome, which is basically cell's waste disposal system. Lysosome has enzymes. Remember these molecular robots that do something? These enzymes destroy things. It has those enzymes inside that destroy. They basically cut up everything. And it has very high acidic environment. So that's why whatever gets inside lysosome, it gets destroyed. And that's why it's your waste disposal. Now, lysosomes continuously work inside your cells. They basically make sure that everything is clean and all the waste is removed. But when it unites with autophagosome, it removes something very specific that was marked for degradation. And the way autophagy, the way you can divide it is into 2 categories. One that is selective and the other one is non-selective. Selective means is that it specifically targets something that is marked for degradation. And the way you mark something for degradation is you attach these molecules called ubiquitin onto either a protein or an organelle, like mitochondria. And once you start adding these elements onto a molecule or an organelle, it means that will be destroyed. So that's selective. There's also non-selective degradation, where basically things that are already not ideal will be destroyed by the cell And this can happen when there's nutrient source deficit, so such as fasting. All right, so now that brings me to how we're going to induce autophagy. And there's a couple ways of inducing autophagy. And there's one is your lifestyle choices, and the other one is drugs. All right, so the first one, let's talk about the lifestyle choices. No, and I have to pause here because I can walk up over this and talk at the same time. So this is as far as I go. I have to finish my video here. And so number one is diet. So number one is fasting. So fasting is one of the most powerful ways of inducing autophagy. There's couple ways to do it. One is called time-restricted eating. This is basically what it means is that you only consume your food within 1 to 8 hour time window within a day, and the rest you fast. You only drink liquids. That's it. All right, so that's time-restricted fasting. And the other one is intermittent fasting, which basically means you don't eat for 24 hours or more, and then you eat. And that's so you have that fasting. So, and people can fast all the way up to apparently 14 days. So that's how you're going to introduce these, induce this autophagy. The way it works is that you're going to turn off the specific enzyme called mammalian target of rapamycin. This is a nutrient sensor, and basically when the nutrients are low, then this sensor is off and autophagy is activated. But if the nutrients there's lots of nutrients around, basically that sensor is on and it will prevent autophagy from formation. So it's really important. So for example, it senses glucose, right? So now you can see interesting links between cancer that I was telling you about and how cancers are very dependent on glucose. So, and indeed, overactivation of this mammalian target of rapamycin, I like to call it mTOR, is often activated in cancers. So that's an interesting combination, so keep that in mind. And the reason why I mention all of this right now is because we're going to now talk about that you can also activate it with drugs, and the drugs that can activate it is rapamycin. You can use it in diabetes, but that's how that same drug can inhibit or activate autophagy because it stops the inhibitor of the autophagy, all right? So I thought I'd mention that. But going back to lifestyle choices, so I mentioned fasting is one, the other one is diet. And there's several things you can eat that will activate autophagy. Number one is spermidine. And this is basically found, it's naturally built in our body, but it's also found in, let's see, one of our young companions getting over a tiny little lip. And it's found in wheat germ, okay? But there is some controversy whether this supplementation could actually increase the levels of it in your body or not. So keep that in mind. Second one is caffeine. Third one is a compound called resveratrol, I think. I probably screwed up the name. Anyway, that compound is found in grapes and other veggies, but it's found in grapes, and therefore it can be seen in something like wine, and it can inhibit that mTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin. It's also has other benefits as well, and we'll talk about another one briefly in a moment. Next one on the list would be curcumin, or a component, the bioactive component of turmeric, and you need to take that with, because it's not bioavailable very easily. You need to consume it with something like fatty milk, and pepper, black pepper, because black pepper increases the bioavailability of it. All right. And the last one they mentioned is this compound called EGCG. Now that compound is found in Japanese green teas, and it's been very well known to be extremely good at fighting cancers. And now you might actually see reason why. Is because it could be inducing autophagy. All right, so that basically is diet. And there's other lifestyle interventions as well that they mentioned, how you could activate autophagy. So that includes exercise, That includes heat exposures or heat shock, something like sauna. And they even mention an unusual way would be electrical stimulation, which made me wonder with the vagus nerve, whenever vagus nerve is activated with electrical impulse, made me wonder, would that be turning on autophagy as well? All right, so basically, this is the direct destruction of the spike protein, nattokinase and autophagy. Now we're going to move on to the next one, which is basically the entire arm, which is now how do we support helping end the problems that the spike protein caused. So the first one was induction of mitophagy. Now mitophagy is a form of autophagy, which basically you mark the damaged mitochondria with those ubiquitin molecules for degradation. So it's a selective marking of mitochondria for degradation, and that's called mitophagy. And there's a number of natural compounds that have been explored. Resveratrol, I can't even pronounce it. That's one. Another one they mention is fisetin, nicotinamide, and melatonin, all of which they claim have been also explored for the potential of treating long COVID. And the one more that they also mention is methylene blue, and we're gonna come back to methylene blue right away. So this is how you would be stimulating that mitophagy, that process to remove the damaged mitochondria in your cells. And of course, remember, we talked about lots of fasting in terms of potential ways of dealing with cancer. But there's other issues with that I'll talk about in another video when I discuss ivermectin role in cancer based on available science. So stay tuned for that. All right, the next one, how do you support healing post-spike protein damage? So the next one would be induction of mitogenesis. So promoting development of new healthy mitochondria. All right, so and here we come back to nattokinase, because nattokinase is also one of the compounds they mentioned that can achieve that is pyrroloquinoline quinone. I think is what it was called. I tried to memorize that one. PQQ, all right, is what it stands for. I knew that I was gonna be able to count on PQQ. Now, natto, the Japanese food, I might have said nattokinase, but I meant natto. That Japanese food is one of the highest sources of that PQQ. So that food, Japanese food natto, it not only does it give you nattokinase, but it also gives you the PQQ. So I wanted to mention that. All right, so that's number one. The other one, cold exposure helps you build new healthy mitochondria. Next one is endurance exercises, but they warn about that. So you have to be careful because of course, your health status already, depending on how much damage the spike protein already took. So that one, and one of the reasons why is because exercises induces nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is another compound that you stimulate its production via exercise. That's the other one that can help you produce new mitochondria. And the last one is they mentioned melatonin as well. And I did some video series on melatonin in the past and its benefits. So please check that out as well. Now, the last one we're going to be talking about is now how do you support your mitochondria to make sure the ones that are already healthy, how do you support its proper function? And here they mention a few things as well. Number one, they mention vitamin C. Remember in those cancer videos, how to potentially fight cancer, vitamin C was a big one. So I did videos on vitamin C, so check that out. Apparently, vitamin C can go straight inside your mitochondria and help to protect it from stress damage, okay? So that's vitamin C. Then the other one they mentioned was N-acetylcysteine, NAC. I did a video on that as another spike detox compound. And N-acetylcysteine is a precursor to glutathione. And glutathione is an antioxidant. So, however, I also did a series warning, right? Because I did a series that NAC, because it's a precursor to glutathione and high level of IgG4 levels might be dangerous for turbo cancers. So check out my series on turbo cancers. The reason why I mentioned that is because we know that everyone who has been, or almost everyone who has been mRNA vaccinated have been shown to produce IgG4 antibodies against spike protein. All right, so check that out. Next one they mentioned for how do you support your proper function of healthy mitochondria is magnesium supplementation. Why? Is because magnesium it maintains proper electric charge of mitochondria. This is called membrane potential, but basically you can think of it this way. Everything inside your body has electric charge. Every single cell in your body has an electric charge on it, attached to it, outside of it. And it's like, you can think of it this way. Every cell in your body is like a mini battery itself, okay? So when that electric charge changes, that's when mitochondria can become unhealthy or can be damaged. And magnesium helps to maintain that electric charge at the right place. All right. And then they mentioned methylene blue. The reason why methylene blue is so powerful for maintaining mitochondria is because it can help move electrons inside mitochondria. Movement of electrons inside of what is referred to as electron transport chain is necessary for producing ATP. ATP are these energy molecules that you absolutely need for everything to properly function inside your cells. So that's where methylene blue comes in. It can help that process. However, they also mentioned there is potential problems with methylene blue. Number one, pregnant women cannot take it. Number two, you cannot take it with the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs. Why? Because together, methylene blue and SSRIs could lead to something called serotonin syndrome, which is basically overactivation or too much serotonin, and that can be dangerous. It can even be deadly. So keep that in mind. I thought I would extend that warning. And the last thing they mentioned is light therapy. And that was really interesting because not only does the UV help you make vitamin D, very important for your well-being, but also infrared. And I'll make another video, really big, interesting video on how infrared is important for your health. And that comes from the sunlight, for example. This is why they mention that people who avoid sunlight, they have a higher risk of dying prematurely than people who are in sunlight, okay? If you can phrase it like that. But basically, infrared helps as well maintain proper healthy function of mitochondria as well. So so these are basically what they mention, okay? So that's how you support the mitochondria. In the end, what the authors conclude is that autophagy is a potentially really useful tool that one day might actually become part of clinical medical use. And they even mention, look, fasting, for example, is culturally has been involved in everywhere in the world for either spiritual reasons or for medical reasons. And get this, it has even already entered medicine, Western medicine, in terms of fasting prior to surgery in order to reduce complications. All right, I'm gonna wrap it up right here. The last thing, because it's a little bit longer than I expected, the only last thing that I'll mention is please check out my Patreon account. If you become a patron and support me that way, all of the videos that end up on YouTube are first pre-screened on Patreon, and it's the Patreon members that decide basically what ends up on YouTube. You see extra notes that I have that I make for my videos, and also my patrons now these days help me select as to what I should study for all of these videos. So check that out if that is of interest for you, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.